Signore e signori, buonasera. Benvenuti alla Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò della New York University. This is our last adventure in Italian opera for the season, but the new season is already in the making. We have already received several confirmations, and Fred might or might not tell you some of the names lined up for the next season, but stay tuned. We're going to give you the official announcement with the entire calendar as soon as we can. Tonight, Fred will engage in a conversation with Leah Crocetto, and we are very excited to hear their conversation. And as you know, normally I tell you something new about Fred, and tonight he told me, instead of talking about Fred Plotkin, talk about Francesco Petrarca. Because apparently, they're concocting something that has to do with Francesco Petrarca. As you know, he's one of the three crowns of Italian literature, along with Dante Alighieri and with Boccaccio. His major accomplishment in the vernacular, so in what we now call Italian, is a collection of 365 poems, mostly sonnets, but not only, almost all of them dedicated to one woman, Laura, with whom we don't know whether he ever exchanged even a kiss. It's some resilience in there. And Petrarca is considered really the father of Italian lyric poetry, so much so that for at least 3 centuries after him, only the words that he used in these 365 poems were considered worthy to be used in poetry. So it took about 500 years to realize that maybe other words too could have some poetic value. But this is the lasting influence of Petrarch on anything that has to do with love poetry. His influence was not only limited to the Italian peninsula, it influenced the Spanish Renaissance, French authors, even if they're more reluctant to admit it, obviously. So I'm delighted that instead of telling you something more about Fred, he was humble enough to leave his place to Petrarca and to let me improvise this little class that I just gave you. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Come back next year for the new series of Adventures in Italian Opera with Fred Plotkin, and continue to be our friends and our supporters. Please welcome Fred Plotkin and Leah Crocetto.
So you may have noticed that Fred Plotkin and Francesco Petrarca have the same initials. I noticed that he obviously didn't write his poems in a leap year, or he would have written 366. So thank you all for coming. This is the concluding class of Adventures in Italian Opera for this season. I'm already busily working on next season. We have 3 confirmations. We have 2 almost, and I have 1 artist that I am trying all I can to get that artist to come. We shall see. And then we have someone even more unusual and unexpected, but that's part of the interest. Italian opera spreads not just to the most traditional places, but to all kinds of unusual places. Leah Crocetto is someone whose voice and artistry I spotted relatively early. You're still a young artist, and I heard her at the Met National Council Finals in 2010. She was one of the winners, and then she, as often happens with young artists, went to all kinds of places, but not immediately New York. So, opera lover that I am, because I heard this beautiful voice with this great singing, I started looking up, where is this young woman going? And let's see if I can be in Frankfurt, for example. I don't get to Frankfurt very often.
Who does?
But I made a point of going to Frankfurt in the winter because Leah Crocetto and Matthew Polenzani and other people in those days were all appearing there. And Matthew has since come here, and I wanted to hear him there. I'd heard him a lot, but I'd never heard you do an opera performance. And you were Alice Ford in Falstaff. And you'll hear her voice. I don't have to tell you. You can put your own adjectives in. All I will say is that I was talking about her to a conductor a couple of years ago and recommending her for a particular part. And I mentioned that there is no singer that I know before audiences today who has more colors in her voice than Leah Crocetto. And the role that I was proposing, that I hope you one day get to sing, the conductor's not yet done it, requires those colors and those emotions that go with the colors. So I mentioned that not to pay you a compliment because you didn't do it. You were born with that gift. You know how to use it.
Thank you.
But the point is that I want in all the musical selections we listen to tonight that you really listen for those colors, because it's a rainbow. It's kind of wonderful. So would you please welcome Leah Crocetto?
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Not that we can't hear you, but they want to hear you in Michigan and
Yes.
other places.
Yes.
So, as those of you who attend these or listen to these conversations often know, I don't go too much into personal biography because that's not why we're here. But I knew that Leah was from Michigan, but I didn't know where in Michigan. And you are from Adrian, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Adrian, Michigan being 30 miles from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and 30 miles from Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah.
It has a population of 21,000 people, and apart from Leah Crocetto, one of its most famous citizens is Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Gary Wills. It is the home of the Croswell Opera House, an historic theater located at 129 East. You have a lot of these Native American names. Maumee Street
Yep.
in Adrian, Michigan. It is recognized as the oldest theater in Michigan and among the oldest continuously operating theaters in the United States. So therefore, you grew up in a town of 21,000 people with a theater of 1,000 seats that is on the National Register of Historic Places and is an opera house, even if they haven't done that much opera there lately. It was completed in 1866. It opened that year. The first event that took place there was on March 19th, 1866, a lecture against the wages of sin of alcohol.
Little did they know what would be taking place in those walls later.
And the hall served many functions in its early years, hosting concerts, lectures, festivals, theatrical performances by traveling troops and local amateur players. Famous speakers who visited the Opera House included Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Frederick Douglass, Thomas Nast, Henry Ward Beecher, Ralph Waldo Emerson. During the 19th century, it hosted performances by Edwin Booth, John Philip Sousa, and Buffalo Bill Cody.
Yep. And they still have the programs
Oh, really?
from those shows.
Wow.
And it was rumored, I never saw it because they renovated it, but Booth's signature is on the walls, because a lot of times you'd go, it's a tradition, if you do a show in an old theater, you write your signature, your autograph on the walls. So there are all kinds of amazing historical things in that theater.
I can imagine. From the early 20th century until 1967, it was a movie theater. The last film there was The
No Deal.
Sound of Music. Since then, it's been a venue for live performances of many kinds, as well as a return of speakers. In 1970, the tradition began again of bringing high-profile speakers to Adrian to speak at the Croswell Opera House. These have included Gloria Steinem, Helen Thomas, Ariana Huffington, Ralph Nader, Julian Bond, Bella Abzug, Kitty Carlisle, Charlton Heston, and Dear Abby. And so I guess my question is, because I know you grew up in a musical family, and you grew up in an Italian-American family, so I've had other guests who grew up in that context in small towns but still had music. But having a building that's an historic opera house in a town of 21,000 people, were you aware of it? Did you sing in it
Absolutely.
young? Tell me
Yes.
about your relationship
So
to that theater.
That theater is where I cut my teeth on the stage. It's where I grew up, essentially. I played in those halls. I used to go, Robert Soler, amazing, amazing designer, technical director, artistic director extraordinaire. He used to stand at the theater door. Well, they had a children's theater troops that would come in, professional children's theater, and we would all be released from school and we'd go on our field trips to see musicals being performed or plays being performed on that stage. So that was my introduction to theater from the time I was in kindergarten. So when I was old enough to finally sing on that stage, I felt like I had made it, you know? But Robert Soler, my fondest memory of him was he always stood by the door, even though he was the boss of the entire theater, knew everyone. He would stand by the side door and greet every single kid as they walked into the theater. And he always said hello, and he always looked us in the eyes individually. And I'll never forget that. That put such a stamp on my person and made me, I feel like it had a lot to do with how I grew up and my interaction with people. My father was the same way, so I'll never forget that. But I also did my first opera in that theater. I was in the chorus of Madame Butterfly when I was 16 years old. And I won my first competition in that theater because the Adrian Symphony, they perform at Adrian College now, but they also we had Opera Lenawee for 10 years. In Adrian, Michigan, small town, had an opera
Lenawee
company.
being the county it says.
Yeah, the county, yeah. Also a Native American
Yes.
name. So, but I grew up doing opera and seeing I saw my first opera there. My first opera was Carmen, and then the year after I saw Tosca, and Tosca changed my life. I was like, that's me, I need to sing that for the rest of my life. So I have such a connection with that theater. And then just this year in February, they asked me to come back, and I did a solo show there. And it was probably the most meaningful evening of song that I've ever had. It was almost sold out. I mean, there were a few empty seats, but it was astonishing to be on that stage that I grew up, just with me and a band. And I had several women on stage with me who had made a difference in my life and who I had been able to interject something into their lives. And it was a celebration of the great women of Broadway. So it was the performers of Broadway, lyricists of Broadway, everything that a female does. So, and we ran the gamut from...
On stage.
On stage, yeah. But it was great. The performance ran the gamut from classical to R&B, so it was really fun.
I've not spent much time in the state of Michigan, but I have been there, but not much. I went to the University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
And
Just the other side.
the
of
other
the
side of the
lake.
lake, yeah. But I've always been aware that there are certain states in our country, New York, Tennessee, Michigan, Louisiana, to name four right away, that are just huge musical centers, just from the bottom up in all kinds of music. Ohio to some degree, but not quite the same as Michigan and the others. And so I guess what strikes me is that here you grew up in a small town, city, 21,000 people, but had a theater. You just said there was an Adrian Symphony. You're
There
not
still
old.
is.
But the thing, what I mean is, you talk to people from the 1930s and they have these memories, but you are much, 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 much younger than that, but you grew up in this environment. Is there something about, I don't want to say about Michigan in the water because...
They always say that, though.
But in the water, not in Michigan.
Oh, no, not.
But the point is that is there something in the educational system, the traditions of the
Sure.
state, as there is in New York? I certainly grew up in New York, and I know that we learn about New York culture and music in public schools from the very beginning. Did
Yeah,
you have that?
Absolutely. Michigan is one of the last states that still has arts in schools, and we've had to fight for that. Arts in schools is, I think, introducing children to music, especially, it ignites their brains in a way that nothing else can. And I don't remember the exact study, but I've done a lot of research on this. There is a function of the brain that can only be ignited when listening to music. So why wouldn't you want your students to be fully functional? So I am so grateful that I had music from the time I was a tiny babe till now. You know, in all of the schools, we put on, there are so many public schools in my town, and we were all friends because it was so small. And even in the surrounding towns of Blissfield, which I think has a population of like 2,000 or something, and Tecumseh, Michigan, which is a suburb of Adrian. I did theater there as well, and all of these small towns did 2 musicals a year and a play. They all had several different choruses and orchestras. Mm-hmm. So music was a huge part of my life, not even counting the music that I listened to in my family growing up. I was introduced to opera in utero, you know, being from an Italian family, it's normal music to listen to.
Utero is a small town in the Abruzzo.
Very small town, yes. Population 1. So that being said, yes, something in the water.
I'm glad to know. I mean, those of you who watch me do this all the time know that it's something I strongly believe in. When I'm asked to consult to universities and so on, and they always proudly talk about their STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, I say you need a STEAM curriculum and put an A of arts in there because it stimulates everything else.
Everything else.
And so it has to be national policy. Whoever becomes president in 2020, because I'm assuming that we'll have a change, I will ask her or him. I'm going to make myself very known on arts policy because I think it's very important.
I'll do with that with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because in 2016, I did an article for WQXR about the arts policies of the different major candidates. And I'm not talking politics here, so I won't name names, but only one of the major candidates said anything about the arts in terms of education. And one other candidate, who used to be Secretary of State, spoke about the importance of arts in diplomacy. But beyond that, there was no mention of the arts in the national discussion.
Sure.
And we're really off base when we do that because the cities, the places that have arts education tend to have more achievement in other things as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't believe when I became an Adler Fellow in San Francisco and was in Marilla. It's a young artist program that I came through. So many of my colleagues didn't even know that they could sing until they were freshmen in college. And I was shocked when they would tell me that they weren't exposed to it. And that was unheard of. I didn't realize what dire straits it was across America, that I thought it was normal that every school had music. But no, that wasn't the case. I was shocked.
Yeah. And also on your resume, you were able to say that you sang in an opera house at the age of 16.
Yes.
You made your debut at the Croswell Opera House.
Sang with my first orchestra then,
Yeah.
too. I won their young artist competition.
Wonderful. So we're now going to hear Leah sing, not live,
No.
not live. We're going to on audio and video. So Leah, what we do here when we watch video is you move that way and I move this way, and the audience will watch us, you, on screen. And as promised, we're going to start with a song by Franz Liszt. He said a bunch of Petrarch sonnets to music. They're very beautiful. Pace non trovo, in other words, I don't find any peace. Another turbulent love song that Leah sang at the Singer of the World competition in 2011. She was the American representative there, and she, as you will hear, sang it beautifully. So,
Thank you.
Julian, if you please.
pace, morte, vita.
Leah Crocetto.
Julian, set up number one, please, number one. So Leah said to me, I don't like looking at myself sing. And what you may or may not know is that every single person who sat in that chair except Morella Freni said the same thing to me.
Yeah.
Morella Freni said to me, she's good about herself. And she was good, obviously.
Yeah. It's too raw. I feel every single thing that I felt that day, which was a hellish experience, let me tell you. I relive every single moment when I watch or listen to myself sing. It's difficult.
Whatever performance?
Yeah.
This could be a very hard night for you.
It's fine. I'm used to it. It's all good.
Since you were not watching, you didn't see that Marilyn Horne appeared on the screen at a certain point, being one of the judges. Those of you who come here all the time know that Marilyn and I have been friends for almost 40 years. We've taught classes together, traveled together, worked together, and she's a night owl as I am. And whether she's in California or Europe or New York, we often have these late night calls where she would say, have you had these calls with her? You're an early bird.
No, I'm not, but I'm not as late as you guys.
All right. No, it could often be that I'm up at 4 a.m. in New York, and she's 1 a.m. in California. And we talk singers. We talk football, which she likes more than I do, but we talk singers. And she would occasionally say to me, have you heard so-and-so, or I would like you to hear so-and-so. And one of the so-and-sos on whom she was really very strong was you.
Oh, wow.
A lot. Because I know you worked with her a little.
No. I mean,
Not at all?
Not at all. But she's very close with Matthew Epstein as well.
Right.
And Matthew was a big advocate of mine as well. So
Okay.
I think through them.
Because she had a lot of good things to say about you. So just, you know.
That's amazing.
And about the Chicago Bears, but
Yeah.
anyway, part of why I wanted Leah here tonight is that her meat and potatoes repertory is the meat and potatoes repertory of adventures in Italian opera. Verdi and Puccini. Yes, there are many others. I bring Rossini to the table whenever I can, and you've sung a little Rossini, and I came to Toronto to hear it.
Yes.
With Luca Pizzaroni. We'll get to that in a bit. But your voice, your temperament, maybe, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, are built for Verdi and maybe Puccini too, but
Yeah.
certainly the Verdi, it just feels natural.
Yeah.
Where do you connect with Verdi?
Oh, where I connect with Verdi is the passion and the freedom. Much to some conductors, they don't appreciate the freedom I take sometimes. But I find Verdi to be the most human of music. I think there's something for everybody in it. It makes me think harder than any other repertoire that I sing. I have different cadenzas at the ends of arias for different nights and how I'm feeling, and I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of performer. In that I always have options, and I always have a plan, but sometimes the plans don't work out the way I want them to, and I end up with plan C or E even. Verdi, the subject matter is always from the darkest part of humanity, I think. And I think it's important to reach into that and to embrace that side and to face that side. And I think Verdi, above all composers, does an excellent job of that. And I appreciate the roots in bel canto. Some would argue that it is bel canto. I would be one of those. That being said, a lot of the bel canto repertoire has many improvisations in it, which is what I love to do. I love improvisation. I have a background in jazz. I love to give and take with a conductor and really create music. To me, that's what's exciting, and that's what makes the audience go, oh, what's she gonna do next, you know? So that's what I look for in Verdi when I'm singing Verdi, especially things like Il Trovatore, which is a shit story, as we've discussed, but the best music in the repertoire. And these operas are operas that I know so well that I can make different artistic choices. Usually the conductors are on board too. But it is a true collaboration with Verdi, and I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so my life was a collaboration.
Wow.
You know, so I love that respect.
We're going to actually hear an RF Il Trovatore next. Is there a particular Verdi character you've performed that you're closest to?
Oh goodness, all of them.
Okay.
It's hard for me to pinpoint just one because when I'm doing an individual role, I feel like I am that role, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's the same as people ask me, what's your favorite opera? And I always answer whatever opera I'm singing at that moment. So Leonora was the hardest one for me to identify with because I didn't understand why she behaved in such an anti-feminist way. And then I got to know her better, and I made some real choices in her character. And I feel like as I have grown up, I have been able to make more academic choices about it and really think the character through and actually put myself in those positions, which is why Leonora is now one of my favorite characters. I used to identify most with Desdemona. And now I would probably say Leonora right now.
Okay. Let's hear. Julian, when you're ready. Timor di Me, also from Cardiff, so in concert form, not in opera form.
Different dress, too.
Timor di me, sicura, presta è la mia difesa. In questo
Crocetto, 31-year-old soprano.
What is that, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
She was young and she was fearless.
Well, yes, and Julian, set up number 3, please. Yes, but also it comes to a point that that I began before but didn't address until now, about the colors in the voice. As you have gotten older, as we all do, you're not old at all, but as you've gotten older, the voice has taken on more colors.
Yeah.
I've heard it through the years. And are you, as a singer, aware of that?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And what do you do about it? I mean, in the best sense.
Yeah.
With this gift.
So for me now, more than then as well, but I have an acting degree. I don't have a degree in music, believe it or not. But for me, it's solely about interpretation, and it's about how I'm feeling the words that I'm singing at that moment. Now I have a plethora of more colors than I had then, and I use them in interpreting words. Like when I say abbraccio, I want you to feel like I'm embracing you. Do you know, when I sing those words, or pace non trovo, you know, I want you to feel that I'm angsty, that I have no peace. I want you to go through those emotions with me. So that's how I approach a role, an aria, specifically this aria especially. My God, there's so much going on in that aria.
We're now going to hear and not watch something. The sound is not the best. It's not Leah's fault, but it was captured, let's say. I don't know if it was, did you do Maometto in Santa Fe as well as?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I don't know if this is from Santa Fe or Toronto, but any chance for me to hear Rossini?
Oh, this is my treasured
I
opera.
came and saw you and Luca Pizzaroni, who played Maometto, backstage after we went out to
we went
dinner.
to dinner
and,
after.
Yeah, and it was a thrilling night if you love Rossini. And the audience, even the polite Canadians, were ecstatic. And did Michigan people come over the border?
Oh yeah, my
I can
entire
imagine.
family
Yeah.
came up, my extended family friends, you know, there were lots of people there.
So just without listening to the words, because the sound, as I said, is not the best, just listen to the singing. We're going to sit back because it's a nice long Rossinian aria.
Cool.
Have some more water and just listen.
It's at the end, Shayna.
Trionfa il genitor, lo sposo, uccello. L'ultimo periglio
tired just listening to that.
Julian, please set up number 5, and then you'll follow that as quickly as possible with number 6. I'm often asked, like 10 times a day, to name my favorite opera or operas, and I list 4 or 5, and then I say, plus every note that Rossini wrote. Did he ever place a note wrong in your
Never.
experience? I know.
It's perfect.
It is perfect for singing. Why?
Because it highlights the best parts of the voice. It is the beginning of bel canto repertoire, which is all about the voice. The operas are written in perfect line to warm you up. I don't think I warmed up before any performance of Maometto II, because the whole first scene is right in the middle with a couple high notes, which is exactly what I do when I warm up, right in the middle, and throw some high notes in there, you know? So if you follow the line of the composer, it's right there. It's right there for you, and Rossini is perfect at that. So that's
But
why.
unlike the Verdi that we heard before and the Liszt Petrarch, there's less emphasis on the words
Yes.
and more on the notes. So when you approach an aria like this one as opposed to Il Trovatore, what do you do differently in terms of your, number one, study and preparation, but number two, your communicative choices?
Yeah, it's way more subtextually based than, say, when you have a monologue in an aria, like Tosca, for instance, Visidarte. There are no repeats in Tosca, which is why it's a great narrative. It's a great story. Rossini, you have a lot of ahs that you sing on. And I remember in 2008, I had a coaching with Carol Van Ness when I very first started out, and she was my idol. And she taught me, I asked her about Non mi dir from Don Giovanni specifically. And she said, Leah, you have to be a madwoman in the coloratura. You have to think, Don Ottavio sucks, you know, things like that. You have to. Those were her words. Her words.
They would be, yeah.
Yeah. She told me to put a thought in my brain to follow the coloratura so that it means something. So it isn't just you trying to sing a bunch of fast notes stuck together, that it actually has a direction, an emphasis, and a phrase. So for preparation, it's a lot of creative work for bel canto and Rossini specifically, which I love. I like being able to make up my own story, or what I think Anna, the character from Maometto, would have said, what she meant to say during all those millions of notes she just finished singing.
Over how many octaves? About 9 octaves.
Oh, 4? Yeah.
Yeah, it was 4.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. Which is a lot.
So when I am asked to name my favorite operas, you all know this, that on the very short list is Verdi's Don Carlo, and Simone Boccanegra as well. When are you doing Amelia?
I don't know.
When is she doing Amelia? Okay. Her manager is here. Okay.
It's on my list.
Yes. We'll talk about that when you do it. But I went to Washington specifically to hear a wonderful almost all-American cast in Don Carlo a couple of years ago. I've been open about this, so I'll say it again. The worst production of Don Carlo imaginable, but with a fantastic cast. Just fantastic. And Jamie Barton was in that chair recently. She was Eboli. And Russell Thomas and Eric Owens and Quinn Kelsey, who's been here. An amazing cast. And although it's a wonderful opera, every note, the whole story, my favorite character, my favorite Verdian character, happens to be Elisabetta in Don Carlo. And I think that Verdi, who always knew what he was doing, gave you what's called the 11 o'clock number, you, Leah, you, Elisabetta, rather than Don Carlo, rather than the flashy Eboli, because it's like the Liebestod of Italian opera.
Yeah.
It's the summation of everything that this opera is about It's better than the Liebestod, I think, and I love Wagner, as Stefano knows, but it's better than the Liebestod. It's one of the greatest arias and greatest scenes ever written, and you sang it smashingly well.
Thank you.
And the great thing about that production was I didn't have to look at the scenery at all. I just sort of focused on the singer. And no, I mean this seriously, and I was so into the music because I really was not into the production at all. And this was a different Don Carlo for me from all the many I've seen or worked on, because I just moved the scenery out of my line of vision and listened to all of you. And what was it like being in that basically American cast, except for the Grand Inquisitor? Were you aware that you were Americans and this amazing collection of superb artists in every role? Was there that sense that it was in Washington, the nation's capital?
There
what was that
was.
like in terms of preparing that production?
Day
Cast.
one, well, first of all, opera is a small world in general, but American singers, we all know each other. When you get to a certain place in your career, you often sing with the same people. So we were all best of friends, and from day one, we would just sort of all look at each other and be like, yeah, this rocks. So we all knew. I mean, there was so much social media going on. We were all, it was a big deal, and we all knew it, and we didn't shy away from that. We were proud that all of these world-class voices and performers came out of our country, and to sing that opera in that time in the nation's capital was amazing.
So we're going to hear Leah rehearse that. And before we do, talk about the rehearsal process. It's with pianists. Rather,
okay.
It's not orchestra. And this is a video produced by the Washington National Opera, I
It must have
believe.
been like day 2 of rehearsal, I think.
And therefore, it's not everything that it became on the stage,
Right.
in part because there's no audience there except the camera. But I'm going to have you perhaps talk after about what it was like to rehearse. But first, we're going to have a little snippet of something else, and then
Okay.
I'll rejoin you here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Julia, when you're ready.
Day 2.
Tu
Recca
So, Julian, please set up number 9. So when you rehearse,
Yeah.
and that was early on, if that was day 2, you can only imagine what the actual performance was like. The audience was just breathless. You were not, but they were breathless
No, I
because
had to have
it was
breath.
just a gorgeous, gorgeous rendering of a really hard aria, and I've heard every soprano sing it since way back. Montserrat Caballé, Mirella Freni, Renata Scotto, even before. And it's right up there. It
Wow,
really is
thank
completely.
you.
And so when you start in a rehearsal of this role or of any role, what happens? And explain, by the way, those colored stripes on the floor. Those were not redactions from the Mueller report.
No, it's spiking a set. It's essentially each act of the set, and sometimes other operas too, are marked on the same rehearsal space. So we know to follow whatever color of the day it is.
Yeah.
That day, that was actually, they did a Facebook Live. We got
You
a
sang
call.
that live? What we
Yeah,
just doing?
on Facebook. And there were,
Wow.
lots of good comments and some real shit comments.
We don't
too.
read those.
Gotta love the trolls. Anyway, that being said, the rehearsal process for that specific opera was different for every other opera for me because I had already done the same production. Eric Owens and I
In
were the carry
Philadelphia,
throughs
yeah.
in Philadelphia. And I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of the opera then. I was a little, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a year too early. I don't know. Probably not, because I did it well. But I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of it. But I learned it perfectly. I learned it come scritto, and which is the secret to singing Verdi. You must learn it as it's written. So for that being said, I made sure and I sang every note value, I did everything that Verdi suggested, and then created something from that. In fact, Corrado Rovares, who conducts there, he came up to me after the first music rehearsal and he said, "I must commend you in the way you have learned this. You have learned it exactly as Verdi has written it."
By the way, he'll be coming here in the future.
Oh, great. He's amazing. I love that man.
Yep.
So this opera, everybody, you ask a conductor, what's your favorite opera? They'll either say Falstaff, Otello, or Don Carlo. Those are the top 3.
Or Tristan and Isolde.
Or Tristan. But Italian conductors will always say one of those 3, in my experience.
Yeah.
Maybe they answer Verdi because they know that's what I say.
Right,
I
sure.
don't know. But so it's a heavy, heavy emphasis on the music. Now, the staging for this was, I don't want to say non-existent, but it was, there wasn't a lot. So we didn't,
And what there was, you didn't want to see. So, really. You don't have to criticize. Jamie Barton had similar comments,
Yeah.
but I don't want to put you singers on the spot about that, but just believe me, it's a fabulous opera, and they just didn't even begin to mind what this opera has in it.
it was rough on the knees, I'll say that.
Yeah.
It was a set of rubber ash, essentially. So I was kneeling on rubber the entire time, but not soft rubber, chunky rubber. So it was digging in. Yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. I mean, the rehearsal process was wonderful because we, as performers, were kind of in a clique. It was like sounds, I don't want it to sound like it's going to come out, but I'm saying it anyway. We were in a band, and then the artistic was there. So we all had each other's backs, and that was what was magnificent about the rehearsal process. And it was a profound experience, actually, to work with so many close friends.
Well, when you do it again, wherever that will be,
In concert next season.
where?
Dallas.
I knew that, yeah.
With Jamie again.
That's right. And that's when?
I don't know. May?
March, May? March, yeah.
I knew it was
okay.
an M. I knew it started
Yeah,
with an M.
right.
The month.
I do keep track of you. You know that.
Thank you.
And by the way, when you began to work on Aida, you and I were emailing a lot.
Yes, we
About
were.
the role and the character and the
Yeah.
music and the approaches and the breath and so on. How did it go? I didn't see you do it.
The second time was better than the first.
Okay.
And the third time was better than the second time.
All right. So why was that?
Because a lot of factors. I was under a lot. I felt the pressure of debuting the role of Aida in the same house that Leontine Price debuted it in, on the same stage.
San Francisco?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It was daunting,
Mm-hmm.
and I was also going through a vocal change at the time. My voice was getting bigger and filling out in the middle, which is what we want as sopranos. We want one voice from top to bottom, and I was trying to negotiate my voice in the old way, the way that I used to do it, and I couldn't do it. So I had to really work really hard. I had many voice lessons during that run. I had many frantic conversations with my voice teacher. I flew him out to San Francisco to work with me for a week, to try to get everything tip top. And then finally I just had to get out of my own way, and I had to be like, just sing, Leah, sing. So I did, and it went great. I was green, so I didn't fully grasp the magnitude of Aida. The second time was the same production. Actually, all three times I've done it was that production that you saw up there, Francesca Zambello production, who's also been here.
The People's Republic of Egypt.
Yes, exactly. But the second time, I wasn't available for the second performance, but it ended up that my schedule flipped around and they had a cancellation, so I jumped into that production. And I was way more in touch with my center, both mentally and physically at that time. So the second time was like heads and tails better. And then the third time in Seattle was I think the best singing I've ever done. So I was very happy with that.
And how do you feel about her as a character, not as a musical? But
I love Aida.
what about her that...
She is all the things that make up a great woman, in my opinion. She is sexy, she is regal, she owns who she is, she stands up for what is right, she's honorable, and she's a lover. Ultimately, that's what gets her in the end, is that romantic side that is the detriment to many women.
You just described Brunhilde, by the way.
I'm sure, yeah.
But they're similar,
Yeah,
actually.
they are.
They
They absolutely are.
The next video that we're going to see, I do want you to watch. It's not that
Okay.
long. It's 2 minutes and 34 seconds. And the reason is, I discovered in my research about you, more than any singer I've come across of your generation, you've done a lot of outdoor singing.
Yeah.
A lot in parks and stadiums and tents and barns and just everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show a video where, yes, Leah is singing, but you're going to see that it's really the crowd that kind of catches your attention. And I want to talk to you after about what it's like to sing in tough settings.
Okay.
I mean, never mind acoustically, which is a problem, but it's a tough crowd.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh,
as Rodney Dangerfield used to say, tough crowd, tough crowd. Julian, please set up number 13. That was Nicola Luisotti conducting, smiling through everything.
Yes.
We had him here last fall. And he was, until recently, the music director of the San Francisco Opera, principal conductor, and has conducted a lot here this season at the Met. I think he's still doing La Traviata, and he's doing a fabulous job with it. So
I'm going tomorrow night.
it's something special. What's it like to sing for an audience that clearly has none of the discipline?
Okay, so that was Opera in the Park,
Yeah.
which is notoriously camp-like. And it's also the biggest crowd that you'll ever see in an opera setting. It's, I don't know what the count is. Do you know? Like 30,000? Yeah. Yeah.
This was the baseball stadium in San Francisco?
No, this is in Golden Gate Park.
Golden Gate Park,
Yeah,
okay.
but it's essentially people get there 7 in the morning to set up camp for an afternoon performance. And it is broadcast, it's humongous. And there is a VIP section with white chairs that people sit in and watch. And that's really, if you don't gear your performance toward them, you'll go nuts, as you saw. You get people screaming and yelling, and they think they're in the park, which they are.
Yep.
So, but they're also the most appreciative audience as well. You get people from all walks of life that come and enjoy the opera, because there's nothing more profound than hearing the human voice do something like that, live and up close. And they get to see the ins and outs of what happens on stage, and because they see the backstage area is not covered, so they can see us mingling around and socializing with each other, and it's a really cool experience, taking selfies, and you get fans come up to the barrier, and like they're waving at you and can we get a picture, and so that's really cool. And they're there all day, so they're there for our sound check in the morning as well, which is really fun. And as you saw, I was bundled in my shawl because San Francisco summers are notoriously cold.
Yeah.
And all of my outdoor setting performances, once I had to, it was literally, it got from, and the morning was like 70 degrees, and then by the time we got to performance, it had dropped down to like 45. So, and I, of course, had my, a gown on, and I was freezing, so I had to throw my leather jacket on. And we all had like coats and scarves, and so it's difficult. And actually, the Maometto performance,
Yeah.
I think that was Santa Fe, because the tempi were a bit brisker than I
Right,
did
they
them
were
in
brisk,
Canada.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
the wind on the microphone, as you heard. But in Santa Fe, it's epically known that there are always storms.
Yep.
And I am singing Si Ferite, and I'm calling down the heavens for these men to come in and come on, And behind me and all around, there's a thunderstorm and there's a rainstorm, because we're in nature, and it's coming in sideways, and it's right in time for my big Shana at the end, which ends the opera. It was the most difficult and most profound moment to this day, and the whole orchestra had to stand up and move under the stage, because their music and instruments, normally they would stop, but we were so close to the end, they kept playing. Nobody in the audience left. Half the audience got up and sat on the stairs, because there was one half of the auditorium that wasn't getting wet. And so it was like an exodus moving, to the right side of the stage, or to the right side of the auditorium. But it was like singing in a cold hairdryer. Imagine that. You've got the cold shot of your hairdryer, and you're trying to sing in it, and your mouth is dry, you're freezing. And the poor girls that were on stage with me were all huddled together in blankets. I was at least moving around, and they were trying to sing beautiful pianissimi choral parts behind me, and freezing, so their vibratos were a little wonky that night, but but that was incredibly magical to sing in that kind of situation.
The one time I experienced a big storm in Santa Fe was Rigoletto. And if God is an opera lover, he or she lives in New Mexico, because at the storm scene in the third act, that's when the storm arrived. And the music was the storm music, And then the storm passed when the storm music ended. Even the singers looked
Yeah.
up.
That was the same. It was the same for Maometto. It
Yeah.
started right before I got on stage, and it ended by curtain call.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm singing about the heaven, and you know that they're gonna. I'll get mine in the end. You know,
Right.
you can do what you want with me, but you know. So it's. I feel like you're right.
Yeah.
God must reside in Santa Fe.
Well,
And he must be an opera
10,000
lover.
waves,
Yeah.
if you know what that is.
Oh, that is heaven in itself.
So, apart from her magnificent opera singing, and I've mentioned the colors and the use of language and so on, Leah, I think along with Stephanie Blythe, is one of the two best singers currently active of American popular song that are also opera singers, or the other way around. But you really, all the colors, all the words, all the everything, we could do an hour just of that. You gave a recital at Carnegie Hall, at the Wild Recital Hall last November, that you know I write for WQXR. I'm not a critic, I'm not a reviewer, but I give out the Freddie Awards every December. And it was no doubt that the great recital of last year that I heard was yours at Carnegie Hall with Mark Markham, because you sang all kinds of music, including a premiere by a friend of yours. And he was in front of me going like this during that, wearing monk's robes. Is he a
Yeah,
monk? Or
he is,
okay,
he
yeah.
is.
And there was this little bald guy in light green robes going like this during the music. I liked it too, but I thought he really did like it. But he wrote it, and he heard it premiered at Carnegie Hall. But then you sang American Popular Song, and the audience was just floored, because it's not a given that opera singers can do that music. And had you come out and just done a night of that, people would have said, well, she's a great singer of popular song. Who knows if she knows anything about opera? It was that good. So I could present hours of the stuff of Leah singing it. I'm just going to present one that she sang at WQXR. It's just, you know the music, just enjoy it, and then I'll be back to you briefly.
Oh, listen, sister, I love my Mr. Man, and I can't tell you why. There ain't no reason why I should love that man. It must be something that the angels done planned. Fish gotta swim and birds gotta fly. I gotta love one man till I die. I can't help loving that man of mine. Tell me he's lazy. Tell me he's slow. Tell me I'm crazy. Baby, I know. I can't when he goes away. That's a rainy day. But when he comes back, the day is fine. The sun will shine. Oh, he can come home as late as can be. Oh, home without him, well, it ain't no home to me. I can't help loving that man of mine. Oh, when he goes away, that's a rainy day. But when he comes back, the day is fine. The sun will shine. Oh, he can come home as late as can be. Oh, home without him, it ain't no home to me. I can't help I can't help it. I can't help loving that man. That man of mine. He's mine.
So how would you approach that song or a song like that in ways similar to or different from an opera aria or a song by Liszt?
Technically, physically, it's the same mechanism. It's the breathing is the same. It's the same voice. I just play with color. And I don't have a plan for those songs. Mark, I'm blessed to be able to work with him. He is the best collaborative pianist out there, and he has the ability that I have in improvising. We read each other and feel each other, what we're going to do. I mean, the version you saw at Carnegie Hall is completely different than that.
Yes, it was, yeah.
That was a safe version because it was in a closed space. There was no real belting. Sure, there was chest voice, but there wasn't like, you know, balls to the wall kind of thing. The approach is very similar to bel canto, actually. It's the whole give and take factor. You know, when you approach bel canto music, you maybe take a few rubati, but then you give it back. It's essentially, you know, you wave at the conductor at the beginning of the opera and you say, "I'll see you at the end," kind of thing. Because, I mean, it's not that.
Is that why Nicola Luisotti smiles so much?
Yes. Well, actually, before that performance, he actually did say, "Don't watch me, I follow you," because it's so
Yeah.
difficult in that outdoor setting. But Yeah, you do. I mean, you take it measure by measure or phrase by phrase in bel canto, where you do, like, you might slow down some coloratura, but then you have to speed it up so it all fits in the the time signature that the composer has laid out for you, and also so that the conductor doesn't whip his baton at you.
So 2 more questions.
Yeah.
We know that much of the American popular songbook was written by Jewish Americans and African Americans, with a few by Irish Americans. But I know you took an interest in Italian Americans who have written that music. Talk about that.
More performed. Dean Martin was a huge influence in my life. We're related, actually, down the line. But his musical sensibility is very based in classical music. And he never did anything over the top in a way that you're like, oh my gosh, he's faking it. I felt like it was always what he was feeling, and that's me. That's how I perform everything. It's how I'm feeling or how I think the character feels. And to me, there's nothing more honest than that. So, Dean Martin was the biggest influence in that repertoire for me. And of course, Ella Fitzgerald as well. She's not Italian,
Mine too.
but
Oh, yes,
but
she
she
is.
could be.
Ella.
Ella, yeah.
Ella mi fu rapita. Ella Jemima Mo.
But you notice the way I approach my mixy jazz chest voice. It's essentially bringing the top of the voice and the bottom of the voice together, so that it doesn't create a strain. So your vocal cords do that, which is danger zone. But I modeled the way I do my chest voice after Ella Fitzgerald.
Fabulous. Final question. I could ask you many, many more, but when you were growing up, did you go to the art museums in Detroit and Toledo, and later to the Metropolitan Museum of Art? And when you've traveled in Bordeaux, in Verona, in Frankfurt, San Francisco, do you go to art museums?
Absolutely.
So who are some of your favorite painters?
Oh, gosh. I love, it's basic, but it's not basic at all if you've seen him up close. Monet is like God's gift, especially when you go to see the lily pads in Paris and you're surrounded by his artwork. It's all that you can do to not lose your breath. Lautrec is also a huge, I love his, I forget what it's called, In the Bedroom maybe, where it's the couple laying in bed and you're not quite sure, the covers are up to here.
Yes.
But it's you can make up your own story to that one. And I love that painting. Or that drawing actually. I will stand there and stare at it forever. It's in Musée d'Orsay. And I have very dear friends actually that, they live in Paris. They were my sponsors when I was a Marilini. And Juliette, the wife, was an art history major. And she and her children actually opened my eyes more to appreciating art, because every time I'm in Europe, I stop in Paris and I visit them and we go to the museums. That's just what we do. And when we were in Chicago together, they come around and visit me when I'm singing places. And we went to the museum there. And I grew up going to the Toledo Art Museum, and I thought, then I appreciated it, but I didn't know what I was witnessing at the time, But I would say I make sure and I absolutely get out and experience culture in all the cities that I visit.
Part of why I asked the colors question, but also because when I teach opera or music to people who don't know it but have a feeling for visual arts, I often bring in an artist and use that artist to explain the music and the temperament. So Da Vinci and Bach, Raphael and Mozart, Michelangelo and Beethoven, Delacroix and Berlioz. So there are many, many more. And I have not gotten one for Rossini yet. Maybe Pointillism, but I don't think so. I don't.
Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
George.
Seurat, but not quite. I have not found the Rossini painter yet. But it does not surprise me that Monet would be right there for you.
Yeah.
And with that, as you all know, at the end of every season, I ask the audience to give a round of applause to Julian in the booth. My silent partner who makes it all work, and I thank you, Julian. And the first date, I can announce this one, is September 18th. And it's going to be a very special night here, not Petrarch, but Dante. And Michael Herschel, who is an American conductor who has lived in Europe most of his life and conducts in Dresden and Vienna primarily, will be here doing a night with me and with Stefano Albertini and with other people of Dante in music. And we'll have readings from Dante. We will discuss how he's evoked, and if you're here September 18th, you're welcome. And so that's the first date. The other dates are filling in, and I will only tell you that two of the other confirmed people are the title characters in Metropolitan Opera productions next season. So big stars, wonderful artists, lots of interest. Thank you for supporting Adventures in Italian Opera and the Casa Italiana, and please thank Leah Crocetto.